Hi, I'm Ronnie West.
And I'm Jeremy, or Dr. J.
And this is Good Parents, Good Children.
Just because you're not a bad parent doesn't mean you're not bad at parenting.
Right now, positive parenting is probably one of the most popular parenting modalities that people talk about. If you look for advice online, if you're a member of parenting groups on Facebook or other places, a lot of what is talked about is coming from this positive parenting modality. And it sort of involves, I think of positive parenting's primary feature as being anti-punishment. And then what comes along with that has to do with techniques of discipline in order to try to avoid having a punishing atmosphere. So it's focused on, how did you put it, relationship building?
Sure. Yeah. The anti-punishment philosophy is really coming from this broader perspective about like what the goal of parenting ought to be. And it seems to be about having this quality relationship.
Yeah.
To have like an enhanced and quality relationship is the main goal of parenting. And it also comes from this emotional space of like, I'm rescuing all the parents who have had negative feelings about like punishment that they've done, or I'm irritated that I've been yelling at my kid. And so like, there's gotta be a better way.
And they're not thrilled with the dynamic that they experienced as kids, possibly, or that they perceive their parents to have experienced as kids, depending. They look back on their last generation or the generation before that, and they're thinking that it's barbaric and inappropriate. And so it's sort of, it rose in popularity for, I think, several reasons. One reason has to do with the sort of the anti-spanking movement. So I don't know the exact timeline, but sometime in the 50s, 60s, 70s, spanking sort of went out of favor with behavioral professionals. And being non-punishing is consistent with that philosophy. It seems like the logical extension of that.
Sure. It seems like there's a couple things going on, right? Like one of them is, okay, well, if you're not going to spank, then you're not going to inflict kind of any kind of undesirable barrier, like a timeout, because that's, emotionally painful. You might not have a certain kind of conversation with your kid because you don't want to hurt their feelings. And then there's also this kind of rejection of the authority hierarchy, right? So I don't want to spank because that puts me up as the authority. I didn't like being punished as a kid because I've got some negative experience, and so I'm sure not going to inflict that upon my children. I think that there's a couple of these things kind of working in tandem.
Yeah, if you're going to punish, you have to take on a higher level of responsibility in a sense, because, well, one of two things happens. Your child does something that you believe they shouldn't be doing. And then if you choose to punish, then either you're right, they deserved the punishment, and hopefully it will be successful, or you accept the responsibility of possibly being wrong and you punish too harshly, or you punish and it doesn't work, or whatever. So you're taking on a greater level of responsibility when you use punishment, and that is stressful. So when people are embracing the positive parenting movement and that idea, they can sort of tell a story about the parent-child relationship that seems kind of nicer and softer. And I think they're also telling a story about the way the world works that is a little bit softer and nicer. And based on the way we're thinking about it, it's not realistic. It's not the best way to think about the parent-child relationship or to think about the world that you're preparing your child for.
Well, the story provides, you might think of it like a convenient fiction, right? So the story goes something like emotional dysregulation, or what was historically called misbehavior, has a lot to do with a lack of skills for managing emotions, for managing the body physiology, and for, well, I don't have enough kind of enhancing relational interactions in my life that are managing my emotions for me. And so in the parent-child situation, it's like the child is out of control in some way, and that's not a derisive term. It just means they're, experiencing something somatically, which just means like in the nervous system that kind of needs calming. And if that happens, well, they'll be okay. And
right.
well, so the parent comes in, right, and is like, hey, let's do some breath work and let's talk about what's happening for you. That's a big one. Let's talk about what's happening for you. The child will naturally calm down. You didn't have to punish. And then the child comes back and has, more positive experiences with the parent. But it also tells a story about what's happening in society, because that means that kind of any negative interactions that happen at work, in the common sphere, at a place of worship, are really about, well, somebody wasn't skilled enough to manage it, or somebody was having negative feelings in their body, and if only those things could have dissolved, well, then there wouldn't be conflict.
Yeah. If you're using, a minute ago I was talking about how if you use punishment as a parent, then that speaks to your responsibility. But if you use punishment as a parent, you're also assuming that the child has responsibility over their behaviors. While if you engage in the positive parenting style, it is more like something is happening to you. And my job as the parent is to teach you skills to recognize whatever that thing is that is happening to you, and then a better way to deal with it. So, we are not arguing that that's not useful. A lot of the positive parenting techniques have validity and can be useful. Our concern is not, we're not going to argue that you shouldn't use those techniques. A lot of them are great. Find out about them and use them. The problem is, our concern is, should you be leaving punishment on the table as a tool? And the answer is no. It's useful to find out how to use punishment well, and then use it effectively to reach your goals, in addition to the useful positive parenting skills.
Well, there's a philosophy of parenting that becomes really problematic, because in the positive parenting version, the child and parent are essentially on equal footing, right? The key feature there is how good is our relationship, or how good is our relationship when you're a teenager? You're kind of more like friends. And then when you have punishing in the tool bag, there's an intrinsic hierarchy. The parent is saying, I'm right about this. I'm going to modify your behavior to make you more right, to make you good, more good, not better, but like actually more moral, right? Or at worst, I could be wrong, but I know better than you generally because I have this life experience, right? Or wisdom. And when you bring that in, that means hierarchical relationships exist, and they exist in society. So one of the benefits then, if you positive parent, is you're kind of able to say we're all on the same footing. But if you take the hierarchical version and you put punishment back on the table, you actually are able to get more effectiveness out of being the responsible parent. Right.
Yeah. And this speaks to one of the things that can be useful about some of their techniques, is that their orientation cares a lot about the relationship and being relationship enhancing. And so that bears out with the techniques. A lot of their techniques can be useful for that. So if you take a look at those, you can see ways to try to improve the relationship. And it almost seems like with positive parents, some of the time they are acting like there's a little bit of a hierarchy, because how can you not? If you're 25 or 30 or 35 and you've got a 3-year-old, you clearly know things they don't know, but they're also denying a little bit of the responsibility hierarchy. So it's one of the things we're saying is, it's a fact. You know things, you ought to know things that your child doesn't, a lot more things, and not just knowledge, but wisdom and virtue and all of these tools that you can help give your child to give them a leg up in life. And as you're parenting, hopefully you're becoming more knowledgeable and wiser, and then you can share those lessons to your kids so that they can take advantage of that. And so it's really embrace the fact that you know more than them, and it's good for them to treat you like you know more and are wiser. Like, that's useful. So the punishment can be a part of creating a dynamic where it's clear to you and it's clear to the kid that you should know, and you should be treated like you know more, something like that.
Yeah. And so we thought it would be interesting or maybe entertaining to go through just a couple common parenting scenarios and give our best good faith effort to say, how might positive parenting deal with that? What might some of the pitfalls be, and then how might we suggest you could deal with that with a broader behaviorist perspective, right? With just more options on the table. So let me hit you with one, if I can. All right, so you and, no. So a parent and their kids are out at the restaurant, and at least one of the children is being unruly. They're causing a fuss at the table, and they keep getting up and like walking around. And matter of fact, they're bothering like other patrons at the restaurant.
Right.
All right. So what's the best faith effort? What's a good positive parent do? And what are some of the problems, and what might you recommend?
Okay, so I think that a positive parenting expert or a positive parent would recommend several possibilities. Okay, so you might lay out your expectations before the meal, and that is a solid strategy.
That's better.
That is really good.
Yeah.
You might hold the child in your lap, which can be loving, and that can be useful. That could be good. I think that fits with positive parenting modality. Sure. You could take the child out of the restaurant, take them to the restroom, take them outside, take them to the car, and then just have sort of downtime. So the thinking might be they're having an emotional issue. They need to sort of have a reset. So you remove them from the situation that way. And I think if you're able to do it, having sort of a feelings time chat, having a conversation with them about what's going on in them emotionally, that might be on the table. So one of those four seem like those would all fit with the positive parenting idea. So one question would be, are there any costs to those options versus if punishment's on the table? Well, Ronnie, what's the difference? If you use punishment, what else might be there?
Well, thanks, Ronnie. I see a couple issues already that I want to pose to you. And the biggest one is if you take one kid out and hey, we're going to the restroom. I'm going to teach you a skill or help you reset. What's happening with your other four kids back at the dinner table?
Right. Well, and this is one challenge with the positive parenting modality is, in my opinion, it takes up a certain amount of time and other resources, and it can make it a little bit harder to have a lot of kids if you want to have a lot of kids, because you've got other kids to deal with. There's other things you're doing. So like your child starts misbehaving and you need to address it and have them not bothering other patrons and not behaving that way. And it's not so great for them. They're getting dirty looks from everybody. I mean, that has an emotional cost on them as well. So you need to get that taken care of, whether it's more kids or your husband or wife or your date or whomever you're with. You're not getting to do the thing you wanted to do either with all of that. So the hope is that when you have punishing on the table, when punishing is an option for you, you use it to train them to behave well at restaurants. When they're 3, 4, it only should take a couple of times going to the restaurant to make it so that most of the time they behave fairly well. And if they misbehave, the misbehavior is they're loud for a moment, and then you give them a gentle warning or the stern look, and that's it. It takes up 20 or 30 seconds of your time, not 10 minutes in the restroom or 10 minutes outside or whatever. And then you're worried about what's going on with your kiddo. So
this is pretty similar to like investment cost versus opportunity cost, right? Like you're saying, I'm going to lay down all this effort on the front end that requires a lot of intentionality, requires a good deal of forethought, but I'm going to get a nice payout. Versus on our opportunity cost model, you have to wait for the behavior that you don't want. Pretend you're not very concerned about the behavior and you're much more concerned about your child's feelings. And you still have to pay the cost of the time away from table. So you're having a less enjoyable evening. You're having to spend more time with the child. And then in the future, maybe you're less likely to go out. And not because you don't like your kid or want to go out for a meal. Matter of fact, you love your kid and you do want to go out for a meal, but like it's just become too much work. And I also notice that taking the kid away from the table for 12 or maybe just 7 minutes, like, is punishing, right? You're introducing something because you want the behavior to discontinue, even if you're not all the way theoretically like intentionally honest about that. That's happening. And also the kid's getting something they don't want. Like nobody asked for a lecture and nobody's having fun. Like while that's happening.
Well, and okay, so this is actually pretty interesting in my opinion. Not only is this positive parenting intervention, I mean, all 4 of them, basically, the conversation, the bathroom, holding them or taking them outside, they're all a form of punishment to a degree. They're also a reward because now you're giving them attention they wanted. Now, it's not necessarily the attention they wanted, but if a kid wants it, I mean, they want attention regardless, whether it's positive or negative. To a degree, they want attention. So now they know that they can get several minutes of your time. They'll be held, they'll be taken out, whatever. They can get attention if they do this thing. And so it's really important behaviorally, we know, to make sure that nothing you do encourages the negative behaviors.
Right.
If you want the negative behaviors to go away, you've got to take away any advantages that they give so that kids are less likely to do them. And all of those interventions have the potential side effect, at least for some kids some of the time, to not reduce the behavior very effectively, which also means instead of training them when they're 3, 4, 5 years old, like in that range, so that you don't have to worry about this when they're 7, 8, 9, 10, it's likely that these are not going to be quite as effective because you took some tools off the table that are useful tools. This won't be quite as effective. So you're going to be having to deal with this for more years. And if you avoid eating out as often, or you just don't take them out to eat and you just get a babysitter instead, then it's going to take even longer because they're getting less practice. So these are all potential challenges based on this scenario.
Yeah. So there's an in-home experimental opportunity of you can employ an intervention and see what happens. Matter of fact, you could take out your 3-year-old who's probably not going to have the most ideal behavior at a restaurant, right? Wait for what happens. You could do the positive parenting feelings time away thing and see, well, does that decrease the behavior? If so, great, you punished. Maybe you try that again. Does that increase the behavior because they got, attention time and it's actually reinforcing? Then you've got to have more items on the table. I'm imagining some things that could be at play are, yes, you bring the kid back and you put them in your lap, but then that's intentionally punishing.
Right. You're attempting to not punish and you're still punishing anyway.
Right. Or, I'm say if you're not wholly beholden to the positive parenting idea, you can maintain like a more traditional punishment at home. But unfortunately, the closer to the behavior, the more effective the punishment's going to be. And so a pretty ideal one is let's do a classic timeout, like a 30-second time away, but not a fun time with me, like a you're stinking by yourself with nothing fun for a short while. And another one that would really not fly with positive parents is, well, you don't get dessert, but your siblings do.
Right. Right. Yeah. Oh, I've got to say, whenever a parent makes it so that everybody stops getting dessert because of the misbehavior of one child, I think a small part of me dies inside. I'm like, okay, hold the phone. So that child misbehaved and everybody suffers. Wow. That kid knows how much power they have. Even if they couldn't articulate it, they wouldn't be able to say, I just got a lot of power because of the thing I did. They know. And they were able to refuse everybody ice cream, the siblings, the parents. That might be worth the cost.
So in our other in our alternative scenario, everybody gets dessert, but that kid doesn't. They're gonna hopefully experience the guilty feeling of what they've done. They've got a clear relationship between behavior and outcome that they can understand for later. It might even be a little positive shaming. They feel bad about themselves. So then you want a kid that feels good about themselves. So, hey, I'm going to do what's expected of me. I'll get the outcome that I want. I'll know that I'm a good little boy or girl, right? And matter of fact, if you don't do it in a way like that, you're missing out on a chance to reward the siblings who, now, wait a minute, I came here and did just what I was supposed to. And like my outcome's no different from my brother.
Right. I might as well have misbehaved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I could have gotten more of what I wanted that way.
Right.
Well, we said scenarios. I mean, we could do another one or table it for another video. What are you thinking for today?
And that's good enough. I will say one more thing on this, though, and that is, we were talking about the different costs. There's a lot of costs that are potentially there that you may not even notice. But here's one. If you have your child trained when they're young, and then you still eat out when they're 7, 8, 9, 10, frequently enough, and their behavior is really good, one of the things you're going to get is other patrons coming by the table and saying, wow, I'm so impressed. You brought all your little kids to the table out to eat. I don't see that very often. All your kids behaved really well. That's amazing. Your kids hear that. They know. And so they get that positive reinforcement from strangers, which is really, really nice. And from the waiter and waitresses and all of that. And if you don't get them trained when they're young, they lose that. And we don't even know what all the benefits of things like that are, but it's clearly useful. And so getting that done is very important. And punishment doesn't solve everything by any means. It's just one of the tools that need to be a part of this. And when you're using it, you need to be making sure the kids don't just know what not to do. We have to give them the training so they know what to do so they can get all the positives. Hi, I'm Ronnie West.
And I'm Jeremy, or Dr. J.
And this is Good Parents, Good Children.
Parenting. Change the diapers of the young and innocent so your diapers can be changed when you're old and senile.